Hello, welcome back to the Project Hercules Diaries. It's not all about engineering, just as a quick reminder, the whole idea is to make a really cool chop. And if you make a really cool chop with a Norton engine, it's the Norton chop. If you make a really cool bobber with a Harley engine, it's the Harley bobber. So to take things one stage further, if you make the engine, it just takes it to that next level. Have you seen the thing over there with the funny engine? So that's really where it all came about. A few people have done it with a V-twin with aircraft pots. Alan Millyard, probably the most famous, with his flying Millyard. Nobody's done it with a single as far as I know, and nobody's done it with a sleeve valve, so that's where we're at. So I took the empty engine, that's the engine cases from the spare set, the timing cover and a head with barrel, down to String at Raw Steels Choppers in Essex, and said, look, can you make us a frame? I've seen your website, I've seen your work. We had a bit of a chat for the morning, free cup of tea. It wasn't the best tea, if I'm honest, but I didn't go for the tea, so it's all right. Yeah, so a nice bloke, and he's come back with his CAD drawing. So we've had a couple of ping pongs backwards and forwards and mail. Originally, I wanted a real straight line from the headstock right the way down to the rear wheel spindle, but by doing that, the headstock was right up here. The bike was particularly high and particularly long, and it just wasn't working. The angles at the top were quite sharp and everything else. We've come up with a couple of different alternatives. String came up with a frame hoop that went right the way around the outside of the engine, looking down from the top. That was kind of cool, but it would have clashed with all of the exhaust ports and the inlet ports on the side. So we've settled on this as a design with a 2-inch chop tube that just curves nicely, and I really like the lines of this, because that line there is almost could be the line of the tank that then flows down here. It's all into scale, so that gives you an idea of the size of the engine. The top of the engine corner there is about as high as a normal bike petrol tank would be. We've got a 17-inch rear wheel and a 21-inch front, and we've yet to decide whether to put springers on the front or a telescopic forks. We've had to lean the engine forward, and that angle has been set now, and I think that looks really well. So how's it going to work? Well, the gearbox that I originally bought from the Toyota IQ, if you remember that video, isn't going to work. It's a bit too big, and the flywheel of that engine runs the opposite direction to the direction that I want it to. So that has appeared on eBay if anybody wants a collectible engine. We're going to make a 2-speed gearbox. It's going to be about 150mm diameter. It's going to be around about that size there. So behind the engine, in that space, there'll be a 2-speed box, and there's plenty of room behind that for the battery and for a little electrics box and anything else I want to put in here. Behind, nice engine plates to sort of tuck it out of the way. There will be a belt primary from the engine to the gearbox. There won't be any gears in the gearbox, but I'll do a separate video about that. And then from the gearbox, there'll be a chain, obviously a chain drive to the rear wheel. So doing this on the fly, I'm not really an artist, as you may tell, but that's the kind of thing that you'll see. So that's how it looks. And then to start the bike, we're going to use a dyno start, which will go up here somewhere. Dyno start, if you don't know, it's a dynamo and a starter motor. You can buy them, they're reasonably priced, and it means you don't need a separate alternator and starter motor and regulator rectifier. So it's all together, and that'll drive off a sprocket just inside the belt primary. So there'll be a little chain inside there. That's how the whole thing's going to fit together. That's how I plan to make it work. The only thing that's missing, of course, apart from forks and lights and the usual mud guards, is a fuel tank. And obviously, if you put a normal fuel tank on the top, it's going to spoil the lines a bit, and I really quite like the stance of this, and we've got all this space under here. So what I'm planning to do is to put the fuel tank underneath the top tube somewhere. The oil tank, by the way, I'm going to move to the front of the bike, so a nice sort of front mounted oil tank on there I think would look kind of smart. So I'm going to put the oil tank at the front. I want quite a long oil tank because I think that looks well, and the drillings for the oil pipes that come out of the back of the engine haven't been done yet, so I can do those to come out the front of the engine, and there'll be a couple of nice little pipes there that just tuck away and into the oil tank. One's a scavenge pump from the sump. back to the tank, and the other one takes fresh oil from the tank to pump around the engine. So I think that'll work nice. The pipes are nice and short. The tank should get, you know, a fair bit of cooling air being right out at the front and being thin. I might even consider putting a really tall thin tank on the top. Depends what sort of capacity I can get. So that's the plan for sort of fitting it all together. No rear suspension, so that means that the chain tension and that kind of thing keeps it simple, and a little sprung solo seat like that. So that's where it's going. So of course, designing the fuel tank is not easy, and especially when you're not really an artist. So I've come up with a few ideas and I've numbered them. So at the risk of sounding like an American on YouTube, if you want to put your favourites in the comments, you're more than welcome. So I've just gone with a few different ideas. You know, a nice curve at the bottom of the tank to match the curve of the top of this tube here, and this straight line here to match the same of the down tube at the front, and this gusset plate to try to sort of pick up the, because there'll be some kind of gusset in here. And I wondered if I could do something with that gusset to sort of complement the tank. Bearing in mind this is a 2-inch tube, so the top of the tank will be 2 inches wide, and these rails here, if you're looking from the back of the bike, as they drop down from the top post, they come out. So the tank will be quite wide at the bottom, and if you're looking down from the top of the bike, it will just do that. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's one idea I've got. Another idea was to just go with fairly conventional flat-sided tank, a bit like you get on an old Scott Norton or similar of that type of shape. Not so keen on that. This one I quite liked, but I've drawn it a little bit too close to the engine. It reminds me of, it's quite a famous chop there was with the whole of the back of the tank came down to the seat, and it was sort of that pyramidal shape. And I think with a straighter gusset to complement the straight lines, I quite like that, but I think the tank's too close. This one looks a little bit pregnant, but I wanted to just get a nice curve coming down and a nice curve this way, so there's a bit of scope there, but it's not my favorite. Number 5 I really like. I've got it just taken that straight line concept but brought it back a bit, so the space is equidistant on the motor, bit of a straighter top end, tried to keep everything in proportion, and I like the angry stance of that. So I'll have to do some calculations to find out what sort of volume of fuel it's going to carry, and see if that's enough. I mean, worst case, I can put another fuel tank down here out the way between the engine plates or behind the seat, but I'd like to keep that as a little rack for me waterproofs or something. And finally, there's this one where just to take the gusset of a curve and bring that curve all the way down here to the bottom. I think that looks quite smart as well. So that may work too. That's about it. I got fed up of drawing tanks and I've run out of ideas. I've got a few bacon sandwichy bits getting onto the paperwork now as well. So they're just some thoughts. Hopefully that gives you an idea of the direction of travel, which, as you're looking at it, obviously is to the left. And once again, thanks for watching.